Hello and welcome to Chapter 32. You have been learning about ICD-10 PCS, the code set used to report inpatient procedures, services, and treatments. So let's take a look at all you've learned while reading this chapter and do a case study together. Here's a case scenario of a surgical procedure done on a 59-year-old male patient. Let's read it together and then abstract it out to determine the right ICD-10 PCS code, okay? This 59-year-old male patient was taken to the operating room and placed in the supine position. An upper midline incision was made and retractors were placed. The left upper quadrant was explored, and splenic ligaments and the gastric veins were identified and divided. Dissection at the splenic hilum occurred, and the splenic vessels were identified. The splenic artery and vein was double ligated, suture ligated, and divided. The entire spleen was removed, and hemostasis was achieved. Blood loss was minimal. The wound was closed in layers with 3O vicryl for the deep layers and 4O vicryl for the skin. Now remember, as we begin to code this, you must always keep the documentation handy to refer back and forth as you determine each part of the code. Let's begin with the first question. Which section of ICD-10 PCS would this code be reported out of? We go back to the case study and you'll see the case study tells us the patient was taken to the operating room. Now, not all of the surgical procedures and the medical procedures reported out of the medical and surgical section will say this, but we thought we'd start out with an easy one. So that's our clue, taken to the operating room. The patient was taken to the operating room, which tells us a surgical procedure was about to be performed. And that tells us section 0, the very first section of PCS. What's the next question we need to ask for the next character? Which body system of ICD-10 PCS will we report with the second character of this code? Well, as you read through the case study, you'll see that it says the entire spleen was removed. That's a good clue, right? Let's take a look. The entire spleen was removed. Now, you remember from anatomy and physiology class that the spleen is an organ. It is not a body system. But we then look and see that the spleen is part of the lymphatic and hemic systems, which gives us a second character of 7. So now we have the first two characters of the code, 0, 7. What's next? Which root operation term of ICD-10 PCS will we use? Now remember, ICD-10 PCS uses slightly different language or meanings for the various surgical procedures. So in this case, we're going to use the same part of the case study to tell us the answer for the root operation term. The entire spleen was removed. The root operation term, resection, is defined as the cutting out of or off without replacement all of a body part. Well, the entire spleen was removed, so that tells us resection is the correct root operator term, leading us to the letter T. So now we have the first three characters of the code 07T. Next, we need to look at what body part will be reported. And you already have the answer to that, don't you? The entire spleen. The spleen was removed. The spleen is an organ, a body part. And on this particular table in ICD-10 PCS, it leads us right to its very own character of the letter P. So now we have the first four characters of our code, 07TP. Next, we have to determine the approach. So we get to go back to the case study and begin reading from the start of the operative report. And we get to the very second sentence, and there's our explanation. An upper midline incision was made. So, the upper midline incision leads us to the the approach open. Open is defined by PCS as cutting through the skin or mucous membrane and any other body layers necessary to expose the site of the procedure. And that's what they had to do. They made the incision until they could get down to the spleen, which was the site of the procedure. That leads us to O. So we now have 07TPO. 5 characters down, 2 to go. The next character will describe or identify a device used. Remember that not all procedures use a device. Also remember that in ICD-10 PCS, we only report a device when that device is left inside the patient after the procedure is over. Read through this case study and see if you see any mention of a device that is left inside the patient after the case is over. You got it. There is no device used in this procedure. So we're going to use that placeholder, the letter Z, which says this is not applicable. 07TP0Z. We still need one more character. And this one, as you look at this 07T table, you will see is equally as direct. There is no qualifier. You have no decision to make because the decision is made for you. And this brings us to our complete 7-character ICD-10 PCS code 07TP0ZZ. Excellent. If you have any questions, please ask your instructor. And trust me, if you have a question, 10 other students in your class have the same exact question.